Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. It's 26th of March. And before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we have to open your word together and to look at your providences throughout history. And we ask for wisdom and understanding as we seek to know your will for us individually and as a group, so that we can work together in furthering the proclamation of the first, second, and third angels' messages upon this earth. We know we are insignificant in very many ways, but we know, Lord, that as we unite with your power, that many things can be accomplished even in little things. So we ask that you can be here now in this study and in our lives. And we pray and ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning again, everyone. So I wish Dwight was here because he'd probably know more about some of this stuff than we do. So I was just working on this, and I don't know how this relates to what we're studying in Daniel chapter 11. It might relate, it might not. So I don't know if people can see it very well. It's kind of tiny. Could maybe make the font a little bigger, but zoom in a little. Let's see if I zoom in too much. Well, I'll zoom in on this first part. So sometimes what we can do is we can take dates and we can create them as spans of time. So I was simply looking at some spans of time that we were addressing the other day, dealing with Daniel 11, verse 29. And I didn't have anything work out, but I looked at the date of the Bay of Pigs. I was going to count some spans of time from there and see if there was anything, because I don't know, the Bay of Pigs is something that's just always stuck in my mind as a little kid, because it sounded, I just figured, it was like a little body of water there off the ocean with a bunch of pigs there. But I guess that's not why it's called the Bay of Pigs. I'm not sure why it's called the Bay of Pigs. But anyway, the date there is April 17th, 1961. And so I looked at that and thought of it as a span of time. Now, what I do with a number like that, so if you can see just to the left of it, I have 41761. So I just write that as a span of time. But sometimes I will use it as an actual number of days. But other times I will divide it by a prophetic year rather than an actual year. Now, if I do that, it's 116 years, 116 prophetic years, plus 1 day. And so, Stephen will tell me if we're allowed to do this or not, but I'm going to take that 1 day as a day for a year. So it's going to be 117 years. So I have above there, it says 116, but it's really 117, right? So 117 years plus 1, okay? So it's 116 plus 1, which makes 117. Does that make sense to people? Can I do that? Okay, well, maybe I can't. But the thing about the date of what's that? Stephen?
So you can do it, whether it's a bit sort of gymnastics.
Okay. Well, the thing is, I failed to mention this point, is that the date April 17th, 1961 is the first day of the first month on the biblical calendar. So that's why I actually thought about April 19th, 1844, right? So I counted 117 years back to April 19th, 1844. I found if I took that number, it'd give me 116 plus 1. And so I just said, well, maybe that 1 represents a year. So the extra year instead of an extra day. Okay. Now, the number of days between those two dates is 42,731. And that would represent April 27th, 31 AD. Now that we're allowed to do, right? Because we just did it, with April 17th, 61, representing a span of time. So I thought that was a rather interesting coincidence. The span of time between them would give us the cross. Okay, so that's in a sense separate from what we're going to look at. So we have this little puzzle. So does that make sense, Stephen? Any comments on that, or anyone?
Well, I'll see what you're.
You actually do it like that. Okay, I didn't catch what you said.
Yeah, I'll see what you're doing.
Okay. Okay, so I'm having that date represent 116 plus 1 years. I'm going to write it like that, just because it's 116 prophetic years plus 1 day. I'm going to have it represent 116 years plus 1 prophetic year. Okay, and then we have this symbol of the cross. So the significant thing to me is the number of days between those 2 first days of the first month. And the symbols there of April 17th helps me tie that with this span of time that I can create by the date itself. Okay. Now, when we think about the first day of the first month, well, we have other dates that can be representative of the first day of the first month. One is April 5th, 2030. So April 5th, 2030 is the first day of the first month, right? That's obviously going to be 79 years later after 61. I think that's right. 60 plus, so we're going to have 69 years later. So 69 years apart is April 17th, 1961, which is the first day of the first month, to April 5th, 2030, right? So you're just adding 39 plus 30, so 69 years. Now, the interesting thing is we had noticed that there's 14,757 days between November 9th, 89 and April 5th, 2030. So we already had that in one of our charts. But if we go to September 11th, which also as a symbol is the first day of the first month, it's going to be 14,757 days from the date of the Bay of Pigs. So it seems rather interesting. So I'm not sure what it means, but that's what we have. So any comments on that? So just the structure is there. The question is, does the Bay of Pigs represent anything that we could look at as far as this fight between the King of the North and the King of the South? Hi, Dwight. So I'm not sure when you came in here to see this, but I just noticed you now. How much did you miss? Did you just get here? Dwight?
The system wouldn't allow me to respond. So I'm looking at the, yeah. Interesting.
Did you see the first part? Did you see my explanation of the first part of this chart?
No.
Okay. So here's how it started. I was looking at these spans of time.
Right.
That we're getting from Daniel 11, verse 29, and the last part. And I'd made a mathematical error the other day. So that is, if I add up the latter shall not be as the former, or however you want to translate that.
Right.
Those Hebrew numbers give me 1 what is it, 13306, I think it was, which, is a span of time. So I was looking at that span of time, and I was looking at different events. And then I thought about, okay, what about the Bay of Pigs? It's just one of those things that's always stuck in my mind. So I looked at the date, April 17th, 1961. And I sometimes will take a date and think of it as a span of time.
Got it. Understood.
Right. So I take 41761, and I divided it by like 365 and a quarter, and I got like 112 years or something like that, whatever it was. And then sometimes I will divide it by a prophetic year to see what I get. And it happened to be 116 prophetic years in one day. Now, the other thing is, I looked at, when I put it in, I noticed that April 17th, 1961 was the first day of the first month. So I thought that's interesting. So I thought, well, how far is it from the first day of the first month?
Look at the comment in the chat.
Yeah, I'll comment on that in a bit here. But I looked at that and I said, well, that's 117 years from the day of the first month in 1844 to the first day of the first month in 1961. And so the fact that I could divide it again, 116 plus 1, I'm using the 1 instead of as a day, I'm using it as a year, the day for a year. Right? And then I noticed the span of days between these two dates. If I put it as a date, 4/27/31 instead of 42,731, it's the date Jesus was crucified. So there seems to be some significance in this, the Bay of Pigs, whatever that significance is. And then we have these other spans of time, the 14,757, that create this little prophetic mirror with November 9th and September 11th and April 5th, 2030, all connected. And then, of course, we have what Iran has noticed there. So he has, so what are you doing there with 21390 days to November 9th, 2019? So that means if I put in November 9th, 2019 here.
Yeah, it's just all the same digits that you would use for 391 and a half.
Okay, so I'm going to put, so I'm just going to put it below here.
Which, we had 391 and a half days to the same date. So it's like a double witness or something.
Right. So we had 391 and a half days from October 13th, 2018 to November 9th, 2019. And you're just saying that we can count that's from April 17th, 61?
Yeah, April 17.
Okay, so if we go from this date, so I'll do it like this. And I'll do this shorter. Okay, and that's going to be the same digits, 21390. Okay, which we're just going to say that equals 391 and a half. Put it like that. How's that?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You just moved November 9th, 1989 over into the middle of.
Yeah, that's got to change to 2019.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's
just
where
have-
I get confused
finish
about
that.
it.
Yeah, so we got that period of time in there. Okay, so just adds significance in these symbols. So it's taking this Bay of Pigs as there's a few witnesses to this date. What's BRB? Dwight? Oh, be right back. Okay. Okay, so we have the significance of the Bay of Pigs. Well, it should be significant. It is going to be this attempt to take out Castro. Later, we're going to have the Cuban Missile Crisis. And my understanding is that, I mean, this conflict with Cuba kind of leads to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, this is going to be in 61. So that means JFK, he was elected in the fall of 60, and then he's going to be inaugurated on January 20th, 61. So this is a bit after his inauguration. And then you're going to have the Cuban Missile Crisis a year later, and then he's going to be crucified, assassinated a year later. So on November 22nd, 63, same day that Aldous Huxley and C.S. Lewis died. Okay. And everybody understands the significance of the date of those three guys dying on that, the significance of those three guys, what they represent, dying on November 22nd in 63.
If you don't mind, how about explaining?
Prophet, priest, and king. Aldous Huxley is a prophet, so to speak. C.S. Lewis is a religious writer. He's a priest. And JFK is a king. So it just ties into that symbolism of prophet, priest, and king. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that before. Okay, so, you know, because Aldous Huxley writes, what's it called? Brave New World? Something like that. Okay, so from the Bay of Pigs to the end of the missile crisis on the 28th of October, 62, is 559 days. Same length as the Siege of Jerusalem. And 587 to 586. Okay, thanks. So the Siege of Jerusalem to when the walls come down, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so the Cuban Missile Crisis on the 28th of October. Well, that's interesting. Okay.
Saying it began on the 16th. So it lasted 12 days.
Okay. So it's 12 cardinal days, not 12 ordinal days. So it's 13 ordinal days if it started on the 16th to the 28th.
Yes.
Right? Okay, which is a symbol of July 18, 2020, because it's 18,720 minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, this starts to get a little more complicated. So the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Bay of Pigs. I mean, I don't know if we're just going down a rabbit hole here or what this is. So I would have to put October 28th. So that's October 16th to 28th. Right? In 62.
Well, one date says 28th, and then another date says the 29th.
Okay. Well, either way, we're going to have 13 days. Whether it's ordinal or cardinal. So.
Yeah, I'm just saying the information I'm looking online. So it depends.
Yeah.
Some people, historians, bracket it differently.
Okay. And okay, so I got to put these things in my calendar converter. Yeah, so just before I even go there, so I'd started talking about Donald Trump's birthday. So if I counted 61,417, that is, if I took the date as the 61st year, the 61st year, the 4th month, the 17th day, which is one way that people used to count time. You know, they would start with the year, then the month, and the day. There's other ways people have done it, but so if I count from April 19th, 1844, that brings me to Trump's birthday in 2012. So that's going to be 5 years before the birthday that he has once he becomes president, right? Because he's going to be president in 2017. So, I mean, if it had, but the thing is, the date that represents 6/1/4/17 represents June 14th, his birthday. Does that make sense? So as if I count from April 19th, 1844, the span of time, 61/4/17. Well, 61/4/17 can also represent June 14th, 2017, right? Which is going to be the birthday that Trump has after he becomes president. So that date that we have from the Bay of Pigs can also represent Trump's birthday. Does that make sense?
Interesting.
Yes. But it also goes to his birthday 5 years before. So if we count that span of time, it's going to bring us to his birthday in 2012, June 14th, 2012. So, and he's born in what is it, 46, right?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. Right, because he's gonna turn 71 in 2017. I have to get some of these things out here. I know this is kind of just sort of a bizarre thing that we're looking at, but we're seeing that there's some kind of structure here, and the question is, how do we relate it to? Maybe it doesn't relate to exactly what we're studying. I just happened to find this. but we could continue to build on this structure in lots of different ways. We put Trump's birthday in there, using that Bay of Pigs date. So so 6/1/4/17, right? So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to draw this all in. I'm gonna have to think about it later and draw it all in. Yeah, this just. Okay, yeah, so this becomes, there's a whole bunch of interesting things you can do with this, which I'm not going to go into. So, I mean, I kind of apologize a little bit for doing this, but I just wanted to examine this. And so there's lots of things that come out of this. But the question is, what does it mean in the context of this battle between communism, right? Because obviously that's what November 9th, 1989 represents, and September 11th. So we connect the fall of the Soviet Union. We have this period of time in which communism moves from the USSR to the UN, and then there's this league made with the UN. But how does that particularly relate to the Bay of Pigs? I mean, we know that this is this huge issue that happens. But right now we just have some dates and some spans of time and some structure, but we don't really know what it means, right? So any further thoughts on that? That's what I wanted to look at. Just hang on a sec. Okay, the other thing that's kind of interesting is if you look at the span of time from the first day of the first month in 1844 to November 9th, 2019, it's going to give us 12/14/6 backwards. Okay, so I think I need to put that in there. So we're going to have to deal with Trump's birthday here. Okay, we're going to have to, because it's maybe what I'll do is I'll just draw another line below there. Just move this down. Okay, and so what I want to put here, I'm gonna just, I don't want to put too much on that line. It just gets really messy. And so over here, we're going to have Trump's birthday. So I'll just borrow this, just paste it again. So what we want is June 14th, 2012. Okay, so it's not going to be the first day of the first month, but we're just going to put that there. So this is, well, I guess I could have done this. So Trump is going to be how old on that date? It's going to be what, 65? Okay, right? If you go from 46, it's going to be, did I do that right? Is that his? No, he'd be 66. Okay, 66th birthday. Okay. Now, the span of time from there was 61417. Let me just borrow this. It's almost correct. So the span of time is 61417. Okay, now that would be the date that Trump is when he's president and he's going to turn 71, right? So that span of time points to this span of time when he turns 71.
So you putting a date of the Bay of Pigs in that line?
I didn't put the Bay of Pigs down at the bottom. But I see what you're saying. I'm taking that date, the number from the Bay of Pigs, and putting it in a different order. So I see what you're saying. I put the dash in the wrong spot. Right?
Right.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, but notice it's the same numbers, right? 61417, 6, right? It's just an iteration of the same numbers as the Bay of Pigs. Okay. But then if we go to November 9th, 2019, so we're going to put in this here. I guess I have to move this over. So this is too far this way. Move that over like that and move this over here. Oops. That's only 5 years. I know, I got to straighten it out a bit more. But if we go to November 9th, 2019, that span of time, so let me see here. So I got to put this date in here. I'll move this over a bit. Maybe I'll write these dates differently. I'll go 6th, 14. This gives me a bit more room. And 6, 14, 17.
That's when he becomes president, right?
Yeah, he's going to be president when he has that birthday,
Okay.
when he's 71, right?
Okay.
The span of
Alright.
time to his 66th birthday is 6/14/17, which is going to mark the span of time to, so that shouldn't be right because 5, oh yeah, that's right, that's 5. 5 years, 66 plus 5 is 71, not 71-ish, but 71st. Okay. But then we have this other span of time. And this other span of time is to November 9th, 2019, is another iteration of Trump's birthday. It's so I'll show you what I mean. So I'll take this from up here. I know this could be tedious for some people. I'm sorry about it, though.
I was just wondering why you put the slashes in between that date on that line.
Why I'm putting slashes?
Yeah, why, are you just gonna put you saying that that's how many days is it between?
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I could have done like 61,417 days.
Okay,
417.
that's what, it just was confusing me why you had a
Yeah.
date. That's right.
Yeah. So those days represents the date. Okay. So if I put so that's the number of days, but it also can represent the date. So the number of days between the first day of the first month in 1844 to Trump, that is, I'm just taking those numbers, 61417 days. I'm counting them. It brings me to Trump's birthday when he turned 66. And then the number of days, and I'm just going to lift this up a bit. Yeah. Like that. And then I'm going to borrow this. And then we can put the number of days also from here to November 9th. Okay, so put the number of days there. Now this number of days is the same numbers. Well, part of the same numbers. But it's going to be backwards. That is, it's going to be 64,121. Probably what I could have done here is just go like this. Get rid of that. And then this span of time, do it like this. It's going to be 64,121 days, which represents, if we go backwards, so it was, we have to flip this around, but you can see that that's going to be the 12th year, the 14th day, the 6th month. So this can represent this date, right? Which is that date. Does that make sense to people, what I just did? So we'd already tied in November 9th, but with November 9th, we can tie it in again to this Trump thing. Okay. So I'm going to take November 9th. Just trying to line that up. Okay. So if we take the Bay of Pigs date, it can be arranged to represent Trump's, the span of time to Trump's birthday when he's turned 66. And that span of time itself marks when Trump turned 71. But if we count from April 19th to November 9th, 2019, it gives us the date when Trump turns 66 again, right? So does that make sense? Or is that too obscure?
So you counting from April 19th, 1844 to
Yeah.
November, right? And that's for every one of these, right?
Yeah. So it gives us Trump's birthday. It gives us his 66th birthday. And it also gives us his 71st birthday. Because remember, when he becomes president, when he's inaugurated, he's 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days, right?
But are you counting from the Bay of Pigs, or you counting from July 1844?
1844.
Okay.
That's why the span going from April 19th to 1844. But I'm using the date, the numbers from the date of the Bay of Pigs, that 4/17/61. Right? So I use 6/1/4/17 days. That brings me to Trump's 66th birthday. Okay. And then his 66. Yes, I know. The Bay of Pigs is 660 days before I'm born. So I knew that. Ryan just put that in the chat, but I already knew that. Okay, so that gives us that 66 again, right? Just dealing with my birthday. Now, there's actually more stuff that I noticed, but I don't think I want to bog people down with too much here, which I noticed before the study, dealing with some of these spans of times and some of these dates. So I think October 28th I already had as a date in 62, but I didn't know why. And we also haven't dealt with November 22nd, 63 specifically, other than we know that there's 3 important people that die on that date: the prophet, the priest, and the king. So Aldous Huxley with his Brave New World, he's sort of a prophet, in the secular sense. C.S. Lewis being a religious writer, he's a writer of stories and stuff as well, but seen as a religious figure. And then we have a king, JFK. So I think that's interesting about November 22nd, 63. But anyway, so we have all this structure here. The question is the Bay of Pigs significant in what we're studying in Daniel chapter 11 regarding the former and the latter, the king of the north, the king of the south? So, I don't want to get bogged down in all of these numbers. Okay. No comments on that so far. Let's take a look at what we've been studying. Now, again, this came from me studying about, but it shall not be as the former or as the latter. So in studying that, I had added up these numbers together, and originally I'd added them wrong. I don't know how I did that, because I got 13431 somehow, but maybe that was something else I was adding up. I don't know. Maybe it was the first part. Because if you add those Hebrew numbers, 3808, 1961, 7223, and 314, you're going to get 13306. And so I was dealing with that span of time. And yeah, so, but I added it up wrong somehow. to switch some numbers around. So I had a different number, 13431, but that was wrong. So anyway, I was looking at that span of time, but it shall not be as the former as the latter, or the way that I prefer, but the latter shall not be as the former. Okay, or the first shall not be as, or the last shall not be as the first. So that means there's a parallel between the first and the last, but there is some difference. And the question is, what is the first and the last? Are they both? Right? So we address that. So how are we going to do this? You know, I'm doing some stuff here. I'm just trying to see if I can find. And I think what I looked at was, okay, that's what I did. Okay, so I had looked at the date that JFK was crucified, assassinated, and it gave me April 27th, 2000. That is, if I counted 13306 days. So it gives me the date of Jesus' crucifixion, but not in the year 31 AD, but in the year 2000. Is that significant? And if I did it as an inclusive count, it'd give me April 26th, the 26th day of the fourth month. And the mine date, the final three, would be 7/2/18, which is the symbols of July 18, 2020. So I know I promised I wasn't going to get too many numbers here, but try to move away from it. Okay, so let's actually look at the paper. Okay, so we've been addressing this. We've been putting in the present truth application, and so we have this November 9th, 2019 connected to November 9th, 1989 by whatever it is, 10,000. I can't remember how many days it is now, 30 years. So 30 years is, 10,957 days between those two dates. Remember, we have that 10,757 days in that chart. So it's 200 days different than 30 years, 200 days short. Okay. And so in this first interpretation, so we have all these three possibilities, and we're looking at a present truth application. At the time appointed, November 9th, 1989, papacy and the USA, the king of the north, shall return and come towards the south. And we put in there, instead of November 9th for the present truth, we put in November 9th, 2019 instead of 1989. And then we're saying that the FFA represents that symbol of the papacy in the USA, and Parminder and Tess represent the Soviet Union with their wokeism, right? The king of the South in this case. It's going to be two people, Parminder and Tess, where it's just the USSR by itself, and FFA by itself, where there's papacy in the USA on the top. So they're just kind of inverted. So it shall not be as the former or as the latter. So I don't know how we would address that, because you would have to go back to this, to what would be the former and the latter, right? Would the former and the latter be like November 9th, 1989 and 9/11? So the question is, the fall of Egypt in 30 BC, where the king of the north defeats the king of the south, in the present truth application, the former would have to be November 9th, 1989, right? But then if we're going to deal with the latter, if the latter is referring to, so the former is this, the latter would be referring to what? 9/11? I don't know if 9/11 fits there. It would in the one, the other one. So I don't know how we would look at that. Yeah, so this one wouldn't really work that way. We would have to, I don't know if we had put in this one, we would put 9/11. That one, whoops, would work. And then this one would work. I don't know if people are following me, if I'm explaining it well or not. So we'd have to think about that first. So the second one, so if we take all of these symbols that we have put in for the present truth, I'll just put it down here. So we're going to have it look just like above. This is going to FFA. And we would still have Parminder and Tess here. That part's going to be the same. But it shall not be as the former, that is November 9th, 1989, or as latter being 9/11, right? Because this is talking about November 9th, 1989. And I don't know, are we going to take 9/11 as that there's a parallel between the fall of Western Rome and what happens to the United States at 9/11? I guess we could. But if we were to do the same thing here, I'm just gonna borrow this first part instead of copying, typing it all in. Okay. But the latter shall not be as the former. So here, the latter we had is 1989. And the former is 1798. So how would we put, what would we put in as the present truth here? Because we know, 1989 and 1798, they have these symbols of raphia and panium. So the former would be 1798, which would be raphia. The latter is 1989, which is panium. And we're saying that November 9th, 2019 is not going to that this ladder, so that, see, this wouldn't, if we're going to say that this is the ladder, November 9th, 2019, it shall not be as November 9th, 1989. So the ladder, 1989. So the ladder is going to be November 9th, 2019. So that's what we're saying this ladder one is. Right? That makes sense? Because that's what we did in the other one, November 9th, 1989, November 9th. So November 9th, 2019 is the latter one, but it shall not be as the former. Well, the former is going to be November 9th. 1989, right? Because that's what it's. Okay, so it's kind of like a circular type of thing, but the question is, in what way is it not like it? Well, in this way, we say, well, the king of the north and the king of the south are reversed when it comes to 1798 and 1989. But in this case, they're not reversed, right? FFA is still the king of the north, and it's going to defeat the king of the south. So we'd have to say, is what way is November 9th, 2019 not the same as, and I would just say the way that we would look at it is it is in that it is external, or pardon me, internal. Now, would that be okay? So you guys are going to have to give me some feedback on this, what I'm doing here. So I'm taking these three different ways that we looked at it, and we still haven't really answered the one above. What ways it's not like it, and these ones. But we have three different applications historically of Daniel 11, verse 29, that we all say are the same, that they're going to all be telling us the same history. There's not one that is correct over the other. And then we're making the present truth applications of these. And we're saying that this is addressing November 9th, 2019 instead of November 9th, 1989. And that it's going to compare what happens in November 9th, 2019 to November 9th, 1989 in the present truth application. So the latter and the former are different in our history than they would be in the historical application. Is this making sense to anybody? Okay.
Okay, so the basic situation is we're trying to take what had been very literal in some people's minds and have both a figurative, external,
And internal.
and a figurative, spiritual application.
Well, figurative, spiritual would be redundant. Figurative, internal. So what we're saying is the historical application of this is referring to November 9th, 1989.
All right.
Because it's talked about this time appointed. And there's a time appointed that's in 1798, and there's a time appointed in 1989. Right? And the one in 1798 is that time of the end to October 22nd, 1844. in our history, it's our line, November 9th, 1989 to the Sunday law, right? And that it's directly mentioned in Daniel chapter 11, not just in verse 40, but in verse 27 and 29, it's going to be talking about 1989. And then we can take Daniel 11:29, and we can see that there are three different ways we can interpret the last part of that verse. It shall not be as the latter nor as the former. Or the former shall not be as the latter. There's two different ways it can be translated, and then two different ways that we could take the latter in the first part, when it shall not be as the former or as the latter, that we can interpret that. So we have the historical application, and now we're looking at the application in our time. And the application in our time is that the parallel, the present truth application, is November 9th, 2019. This battle between the North and the South is going to be a battle within this movement between FFA, between the Alpha and the Omega, let's put it that way, right? So FFA is the Alpha and Parmenion and Tess as the Omega. Now, if we take it that way, one thing that we can understand is that we could translate this, especially in this last one, but the latter, we could translate this word latter, which is 1989. We can actually just say it's the Alpha, or the Omega, right? Right. So the latter can be the Omega, because that's the last. I'm going to kind of put this, maybe I'll do it this way. You understand what I'm saying here? Because the last shall not be as the first.
Right.
Okay. So we can say that the last is the Omega, and the former. So another way that we can look at this in the present truth application. There we go. So we could have the former being Alpha as well, because that's the Omega. So Alpha and Omega. So Alpha, I'm just going to put this at the end. I don't know why I put it at the beginning. Yeah. So if I take this Alpha as representing, so this would not be representing here. This wouldn't be talking about necessarily the events. But it's saying that, but the latter, the Omega, shall not be as the former. So the Omega is Parmender's movement, and the Alpha is this movement. So North and South are reversed. So I think in this interpretation, so maybe what we would do is we would just get rid of this here. I'm gonna copy this. I'm not gonna get rid of it. I'm just gonna put it as an alternative. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of this here. So this was kind of like the first way I looked at it, but now we're going to take the first and the last. So, and maybe instead of saying the latter, and this one I'll just put, but the last shall not be as the first. Now that's the way the Bishop's Bible translates it, right? And just for people, me talking about the Bishop's Bible is a translation that was that predates the King James. It's published in 1568. So you're looking at, roughly 45 years before the King James. What would that be? 43 years? 43 years before the King James. Okay. And I don't know much about the Bishop's Bible. I mean, I know it's a Protestant Bible. Predating the King James. I don't know all the different old translations, but it's going to say in that verse, but the last shall not be as the first. At the time appointed, he shall come again and go toward the south, but the last shall not be as the first. Something like that, Okay, does that make sense? So we can say, well, the last is the Omega and the first is the Alpha. And since we already were addressing those two groups, does this make sense? And the question is, so if we're just going to have this here, I guess what I would do is I would go, I wouldn't put November 9th there. I'd just say the Omega shall not be as the Alpha. And in this case, now it says that the north and south are reversed. What would that mean in the sense that the Omega is not like the Alpha? Because we're saying November 9th, 1989, the King of the North is going to defeat the King of the South. Are we just going to say then it's reversed? But it's not, right? That is, the King of the North still defeats the King of the South, right? But it's saying that the first, so in this case, it's not comparable. I don't know how to explain it, but we're just saying that there's something about the Omega that's not the same as the Alpha. And we're not talking about events here. We're just talking about these two groups. Now, that's not how we really interpreted it, right? We didn't interpret one as the latter and one as the former, as far as the King of the North and the King of the South. But here we are in this final interpretation, this fourth one. So we got this or.
It's kind of interesting. You brought this up regarding the Bishop's Bible.
Yeah.
There were 3 versions of the Bishop's Bible prior to the King James.
Okay.
So it's kind of interesting because the first one, published under the authority of the Anglican Church, was in 1568.
Yeah.
It was revised 4 years later. And then it was the version that came out 30 years after that was the base text where the King James was drawn from.
Yeah. So you're right. And so you got that 30 years in there.
So my question is, does this give an interrelation to the decrees of
That's a 3-1 combination.
right?
Yeah. So the Bishop's Bible is an English edition of the Bible, which was produced under the authority of the Established Church of England in 1568. I'm reading Wikipedia. It was substantially revised in 1572, and the 1602 edition was prescribed as the base text for the King James Version. That was completed in 1611. So it's a precursor to the King James. Right, there was the Great Bible of 1539. That was the first authorized Bible in England. And the Geneva Bible was published in 1560 by Sir Rowland Hill. So a lot of these Bibles, they're very interesting. I mean, I used to know a lot more about the history of the Bible, translations, but forgot a lot of it. I definitely knew some of this history, not so much the Bishop's Bible as much as the Great Bible and the Geneva Bible, which is well known. But yeah, so just this Bishop's Bible. Now it's giving us this 30 years too, right?
Right.
So, and it's the one that's going to give us this clear, that but the last shall not be as the first.
Right.
Now, one of the things we know is that, this first and last is this principle of Alpha and Omega. It's part of one of the principles of Bible prophecy. It's one of the tools we use. God declares the end from the beginning. And we have like the first Adam and the last Adam, right? Those types of things. It represents typology, right? It's a basic symbol for typology itself. Okay, so any other thoughts on that? How would we? I need to do this right. We got our own brackets. So if we say that the last shall not be as the first, because it's at the time appointed, November 9th, 2019, FFA is going to come against Parminder's and Teth's movement. But then it says, but the last, that is Parminder and Teth's movement, the Omega, shall not be as the Alpha. I mean, that's how I'm interpreting that. That it's comparing these two groups. So it's not going to be as the first. What does that mean, it's not as the first? Because they're teaching strange doctrine. And if we're looking at a comparison, in the original, we're comparing events. An event which is 1989 and 1798. Right? But so that's in the historic application. So to just put Alpha and Omega there, or Omega and Alpha, and say that the last is not going to be as the first, we're sort of comparing apples and oranges here. One is events, the other is the movements. We're not interpreting the historical application as the last being, well, maybe the last would be the papacy. I don't know. But see, that's in 1989. So in 1989, if we talk not so much about, the event of 1989, we're I don't know if we could say, I don't know how to apply that. It's just,
I'm wondering about the present condition of Parminder and Tess. Probably ain't got nothing to do with this, huh? Their
well,
present condition.
Yeah, so their last condition will not be as their first. Now let's look up last and first in the Bible. So let's do a little study here. Got about 15 minutes. Okay, so we got last and we have first. And so we're going to search for all of those words, and we're not going to use the Bishop's Bible. We'll use the King James. Okay, now the acts of David the king, first and last. Okay, that's 1 Chronicles 29:29. They are written in the book of Samuel the seer, and in the book of Nathan the prophet, and the book of Gad the seer. Okay, so this is talking about the acts of David that are written in a book, and it's going to list 3 of them. Can that relate to the Bishop's Bible? The first and last. We're talking about the first and last, and we're talking about the Bible, a book of the Bible, the Acts of David the King. And they're written in the book of Samuel, the book of Nathan, and the book of Gad. Right?
None of which technically we have.
What's that?
I said none of which technically we have.
Well, we have Samuel. 1st and 2nd Samuel. We just don't have the book of Nathan, the prophet, or the book of Gad. Okay. Now, it's also in a chapter that's 29-29. Right? So it's a doubling or verse, pardon me, a doubling verse. And also mentioned in 2 Chronicles 9:29. So there we got a 2929 there as well. You see that?
Okay.
So we got 29:29 in 1 Chronicles, and in 2 Chronicles 9 verse 29. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, are they not written in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer against Jeroboam the son of Nebat? Now there is a lot here, right? There's a lot of stuff here in just these two references to first and last that connects us to the Bishop's Bible, right, as being a book that is recording prophetic history. And in each of them, 3 different books are being mentioned. And we have 3 editions of the Bishop's Bible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And we have 29:29 represented in both of these, right? Because 2 Chronicles 9:29 has the 2929 as well. And we've run into 2929 before in other verses. I can't remember where. Right now, I'm looking at the Bishop's Bible here, but I can go to the King James. So we got the Acts of Solomon, the Acts of David. Then we're going to have 2 Chronicles 12:15. So we're going to have a third example of where it's going to mention first and last. Now the Acts of Rehoboam, first and last, are they not written in the book of Shemaiah, the prophet, and of Iddo the seer concerning genealogy? And there was wars between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. So one is it's bringing us to this history of the dividing of the kingdom in 977, Rehoboam and Jeroboam, right? It addressed David, and it addressed Solomon, right? We didn't have Saul in there, but David and Solomon. And now the division of Solomon's kingdom, where you're going to have these battles between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Okay? Now that's 2 Chronicles 12:15. So I don't see any symbolism there particularly. And then we have 16:11, 2 Chronicles 16:11. Is 16:11 important? This is our fourth reference to first and last. Anything about 16:11 that we should consider in the context of the Bishop's Bible and
Well, of course.
and three editions of the Bishop's Bible, and then the fourth is the King James in 16:11.
Right.
Okay. So behold the acts of Asa. He's the one who follows Rehoboam. First and last, lo, they are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. Right? So the book of the kings of Judah and Israel, well, that's the Bible, right? History of God's people. So we discovered something. I don't know particularly what it means, but when it comes to first and last, we can relate it to the Bishop's Bible, which gives us this first and last. And then we can look at the first 4 times that first and last show up. So we know the Bishop's Bible has 3 iterations, And then the fourth is going to be the King James in 1611. And here we're going to have 1611, 2 Chronicles 1611, being the fourth time we have first and last mentioned together in the Bible. And the first, and all of these are going to address acts. First David, then Solomon, then Rehoboam in his war between Jeroboam. Right, so these are all kings of Judah. And then Asa, right? And I believe Asa is the one after Rehoboam, if I remember correctly. Right, Steve? Is that correct?
No, I think there's another one. I think Abijah.
Abijah's before Asa? Asa?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so anyway, he's one of these kings, but it's going to be the fourth time that you have this mentioned. Okay. Now you're going to have, of course, this pattern shown further on, right? You're going to have it with Jehoshaphat, first and last, Amaziah, first and last. But in each one of these, they're going to either talk about written in the books of kings of Israel or the books of Judah and Israel, right? You're going to have Uzziah, first and last. Isaiah the prophet's going to write about him. And then you're going to have, so the rest of his acts, who is this? He is in 28, 26. Ahaz's, they just don't mention it, his name there. And his deeds, first and last, behold, they're written the kings of Judah and Israel. That's going to be Josiah, right? So you're going to have that in 2 Chronicles 1, 2, 3. So you're going to have 8 different times, 9 different times that you're going to have that formula for the first and last being written, being recorded. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty significant. And we're just going to finish this off with just looking at more firsts and lasts. We're going to have Nehemiah 8:18, right? Also day by day. Also day by day, from the first day until the last day, he read the book of the law of God. So in this one, we're going to have it again referring to the scriptures, but it's going to be from the first day to the last day that the book of the law is going to be read. Now we know in Nehemiah, that's going to be Nehemiah reading this, right? And they kept the feast 7 days, and the 8th day was a solemn assembly. So this is going to be Nehemiah 8:18. They're going to talk about the 7th day and then the 8th day. So this is going to be this reading of the book of the law. Now the other first and last is Isaiah 41:14. Who hath wrought it and done it? I should click on these verses so people can see them more clearly. Right. And then Isaiah 41:4. Who hath wrought and done it, calling the generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he. So this is talking about, again, God declaring the end from the beginning, but it's the generations, right? So this is the recording or the history of mankind that's addressed in this first and last. The next one that's pretty familiar probably to us, the most popular one, is Isaiah 44:6. Thus saith the Lord, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts, I am the first and I am the last, and beside me there is no God. And who as I shall call and shall declare it and set it in order for me, since I appointed the ancient people and the things that are coming and shall come, let them show unto them. Fear ye not, neither be afraid. Have I not told thee from that time and have declared it? Ye are even my witnesses. Is there a God beside me? Yea, there is no God that I know of. So this is about God's ability to appoint everything in its order, right? So he's going to set everything in its order, in a row, in order. These events, okay? Isaiah 48:12, O Jacob and Israel, hearken unto me, O Jacob and Israel, my called. I am he. I am the first and I am also the last. Jeremiah 50, verse 17. Israel is scattered as the sheep. The lions have driven him away. First the king of Assyria hath devoured him. And last this Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, hath broken his bones. So we have here the former being Assyria and the latter being Babylon. Right? So again, very significant. Now, another one I was thinking of is Matthew 12, verse 45. Then goeth he and taketh himself seven other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there, and the last state shall be greater. The last state of that man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation. So if we apply that to Parminder and Tess, we could see, but many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. So that's another one where we have first and last. So we're going to stop there for today. So this last and first is rather interesting. The other one is Revelation 1:11. I should mention that. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last. And what thou seest, write in a book and send it unto the seven churches which are in Asia, unto Ephesus, unto Smyrna, unto Pergamos, unto Thyatira, unto Sardis, and unto Philadelphia, and unto Laodicea. And there's other ones also. The first and last is constantly mentioned in the seven churches, not with every one, but in three of the churches. Or two of the churches, I guess. In the angel of the church of Smyrna and Thyatira, first and last are going to be mentioned. And it's right, in Revelation 22, just near some of the last verses, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Okay. So any final comments before we close with prayer? Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the study today, for the unexpected things that you have shown us. Help us to understand them, to internalize these truths and to recognize our need of you. And we pray that you can correct us, that you can correct this movement, and that we can see your hand leading us. Be with each person. May your angels watch over us today. And we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.